My need to be around people who were into wine superseded the need for me to be around people who look like me.
On behalf of Wine Guardian and our new Stewardship series, I want to welcome André Hueston Mack. Andre, you've gone from basically the pinnacle of fine dining at Per Se and French Laundry to becoming, I don't know, what I would say is the most recognizable disruptor in wine today. I think so.
Well, no, I mean, it's just always funny. I guess never my intention, but it's always nice to have your work recognized.
You know, in the wine circles, we know who you are. But for the viewers who are meeting you for the first time, who is André Hueston Mack? You know,
I fell in love with wine by watching old episodes of Frasier. And then from there, my curiosity, took me all around the world from, working with Thomas Keller at the French Laundry, then moving towards to New York to run the beverage department at Per Se. And wine has just really kind of taken me all over the world. And I think, the more diverse backgrounds people have, the better that it makes the wine world.
I understand you were born in Trenton, not too far from where I am now in the Philly suburbs.
Yeah, no, totally. Trenton, New Jersey was where I was born.
You wound up in Texas, and that's where you became a somm for the first time. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, I caught the wine bug in San Antonio, Texas, and the rest was kind of history.
Sounds like you really dived deep into like Frasier pop culture, I guess.
Well, yeah, no, they were funny. They were kind of pompous assholes, but the camaraderie that they built around alcohol, mainly wine and drinking, I found fascinating. So the show just opened the door, just said, he gave me the courage to walk into a wine store. And then next thing you know, 18 months later, I was a sommelier at the French Laundry. So it was one of those things where I dove in pretty quickly. The catalyst was Frasier, but then came the work.
In those early years when you were somm, did you actually feel like you belonged in the traditional wine culture?
The wine industry was very welcoming if you were willing to assimilate. Obviously, I realized that I was the only person that looked like me sitting in the room. But, those are the things that I was willing to sacrifice to be around other people who wanted to be around wine. And I had to be okay with that. And I was.
Your cohorts used to call you Mouton Noir. You decided to kind of embrace it and use it as a power.
Yeah, it was just fun, right? Like we were all making up nicknames, and it was a reference that we used of wine that was called Black Chicken. And they're like, we should call you Black Chicken. And I was like, no, you're not calling me Black Chicken. And then they kind of went through and they said, we call you Black Sheep. But then somebody said it in French. For me, it was like I used that to empower myself to say, oh yeah, this is an alter ego. We all have to take on a little bit of stuff that we're not in a public place, right? Hey, I like to use profanity, but I know that I can't use that here. For me, it's like I was willing to learn the rules in order to be able to break them.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
When you don't see a lot of people who look like you don't see anybody that looks like you tend to think that it's not for you. My need to be around people who were into wine superseded the need for me to be around people who look like me.
That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
You and I both come from the corporate world before we were in wine. Yeah, so the corporate world is sort of similar in that respect, too. There are certain rules to play.
Yeah, totally.
You saw this as your way, an entry point into the world, and after that, you could kind of like make it your own.
I could bend the rules a little bit once I knew what the rules were.
Is it 2007? Is that when you founded Maison Noir Wines?
Yeah, I quit working at Per Se, and the pursuit was to continue to learn about wine outside the full walls of the restaurant. And I felt like by making my own wine and starting an own company, I could continue to learn about wine, but I could scratch, several other itches I had. I really wanted to be an entrepreneur. I really wanted to have a little bit more creativity in my life. And so making wine and starting a company that allowed me to do that.
Like after working as a somm and kind of having to move through the stiffness of that world, was this sort of like a rebuttal to that?
No, I think it was just a continuation of that, right?
Yeah. Natural progression.
Yeah, where it's just like, okay, like you always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like how can what you learn help you do this part?
Was it supposed to be about the wine, or did you always have the vision that it was going to be like a wider creative tent for like design and storytelling?
No, it was just wine. And what you realize, there's so many different jobs, different hats to wear. When you have one employee, yourself, you have to tend to do all of those things. We needed tech sheets. We needed
labels.
Yeah, labels, all of those things that I just ended up teaching myself to do. Then you realize you needed merch. And so we started selling T-shirts well before we started selling any bottle of wine. It was through designing those t-shirts that actually helped me build my graphic design skills, right? And it was through those t-shirts that taught me how to build an e-commerce business. It also taught me how to cross marketing, because those people who bought t-shirts, later we could market back to them and to see if they wanted to buy wines. Part of the reason was to have more creativity in my life, and wine kind of gave me all of that.
I have to be kind of honest with you. I'm drinking wine here today, but I'm in the Philly market, and it was impossible to find your wines.
As long as you're drinking wine, and that's great.
If someone opens a bottle of like other people's Pinot or horseshoes and hand grenades, love drunk, what's the spirit, what's the soul that they're going to get in those wines?
Well, for me, I wanted to wines that weren't only transparent and honest and truly spoke of a place, but wines that weren't adulterated on oak or alcohol, right? These are wines that were made for food. Working as a sommelier in restaurants, the lifeline of a beverage program or the profit center are the wines by the glass. These are meant to be wine by the glass. What you're going to get is like fun, energetic wines that are traditionally of that place that you get them from. They are pretty much classic, and they over-deliver in price and quality ratio.
And you're sourcing a lot of your grapes from Oregon and California, is that correct?
We are based in the Willamette Valley in Oregon. So yeah, 90% of what we do is from the Willamette Valley.
And you kind of also play around with some more nerdy grapes too. Like you have Trousseau, that's the best out of Jackson.
Yeah, I think.
Where did that come from?
For me, well, I mean, all of that came from the sommelier days, right? Like, we always geeked out on some of the, the lesser known grapes. And I think, making smaller versions of those kind of really keep the creative juices going.
One of the things I think I remember you talking about in your TED Talk was just like having a sense of joy about what you do. And I think it's one of the things in the wine world, like people take themselves so seriously all the time. I found that to be off-putting when I first got into wine. I just wished there was more of that kind of like fun and that spirit of joy.
For a lot of people on the surface, sometimes, and that's what you get a lot of, is the seriousness. But I think it's the layers underneath that that you have to discover. You can have fun and have a good time.
If you really dig down into it, like you travel to places like France or Italy or Spain, it's just salt of the earth people. They're farmers working the earth with their hands, and they love what they do. And you're going to go to the tasting room, and you're going to meet them in the tasting room with their hands still dirty and the dirt under their fingernails. Totally. They love what they do, and they love their wines, and that's what the passion is really about.
This is true.
I found out you and I are almost the exact same age.
Okay.
We're both MTV generation kids. Would you say MTV was a big part of your life?
It's a huge part. I would say just music in general, but yeah, I'm definitely part of that generation.
You mentioned in your Maison Noir Wines literature a lot. You talk about skate culture.
Yes.
Which is interesting because I was a bit of a skate rat myself. I don't know. Did you actually skate?
Yeah, I skate, Pal Peralta, all that, bro. Yep. Half pike in the backyard. Yep. Oh, yeah.
I had the Lance Mountain board.
I had McGill, and then I had a Marc Gonzalez. That's really cool.
Yeah, I love that culture. But I see a lot of that. I see so much of that like kind of 80s subculture, that DIY attitude all over the Maison Noir Wines aesthetic.
I mean, it's where you get it from. It's like, it took nothing for your favorite skateboarder to hijack the 7-Eleven logo and put it on a skateboard, right? Or it was on a sticker, right? And you made the sticker. Or I think in life, at least for me, was always trying to put together your loves, so, I was a kid that was raised on hip hop and punk rock and skateboard culture, basketball, and then later fell in love with wine. To be able to put all of those things together really feels authentic to me because they all played a major role in shaping who I am.
It's nice when you finally get to the point in your life where you're able to mash up all the different things that define who you are over time and make it into a career. Mm-hmm. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, no, and then it doesn't feel like work.
I tell people all the time, as a business owner of 10 years now at this point, it's not easy. Like every day I get up, I feel like I'm doing something new for the first time. But the good part about it is that it's mine. It belongs to me.
Just because you love it doesn't mean that you don't sacrifice, right?
I want to talk to you a little bit about, your design. So has that kind of image and culture focus been key to reaching new customers?
Can't say that it's new customers. I think it's just talking to a certain set of people who are into wine that is different. And then you get the people who who've never really been into wine or taken wine seriously. And I feel that kind of eases the interaction, something that they can understand. You know, it's like you label a wine love drunk, and
it's disarming.
Yeah. You can say, oh, well, you get to kind of make up what that means. You know, you see a name like André Mack Cellars, there's not a lot to interpret there. Right? This is a person's name. Who is this person? Versus love drunk, you're like, oh, well, I mean, shit. I guess like I was love drunk before, you know what I mean? Like, so it's that whole idea that it doesn't completely shut it off. It allows curiosity. And through that curiosity, I think people are more led to pick it up off the shelf and to put it in the cart and maybe possibly take it home and drink it.
So when I do my wine tastings, I always try to kind of like find what it is that people care about, what their value system is, and then show them how the wine fits into that.
It's art, right? Like in the way of like, you know, asking a musician, is this the way that they wanted somebody to think about their music? I think a lot of times it's like, I just wanted to make the art, right? Like I wanted to make something that would be fun and attractive for me to drink. And that is kind of how I go about it. People, when they buy stuff from you, are renting what they want your brand to say about them, about who they are. I wanted to make things that were fun and interesting for me, that tasted great, that had a sense of humor.
And if other people see themselves in that, or if they can relate to that, then great.
Yeah, and that, you know, and that's why, you know, having a sense of self. We don't have to chase everybody, right? It's like, you know, if you like it, then that's great. And I'm grateful, and I have a lot of gratitude for that.
In the wine world, there's this kind of elephant in the room right now. Everybody's talking about how wine is failing to reach young people. Is this a real problem, or is the industry just kind of like failing to like tell the story that people are looking to hear right now?
Both of those things can be true, right? People are probably less interested in wine, but for me, I think wine is just not relevant. It's not showing up in the places that people pay attention to. Everybody's still thinking about marketing, but it starts with culture. So you have to tell the stories and be in the places where the culture is at, right? And that makes you relevant. We're just not relevant. and the relevancy will come from, you know, being, you know, not being in the art gallery space, but like, you know, being at a rooftop.
Or even at a sports game or something.
Right. That's wine showing up where the culture's at, right? Making it relevant. If you're not at the cookout, then we ain't nobody talking about it.
So to you, it's less an issue about the messaging, and it's more about taking it to places, getting it to more places where people can access it.
Correct. And, you know, I mean, sometimes the messaging can just be by being there.
Yeah.
Right. You don't need to say you don't have to say anything else. Like the fact is like, oh, you're at like this jerk barbecue hangout that they're putting up this week. Are they at the symphony? Are they doing concerts? Like, what do they like to do? Show up in those places. You think about a Coca-Cola commercial. They're not at the Coca-Cola plant, right? But think about all wine commercials. They're walking through the vineyard.
Walking through a winery, yeah, which 98% of the people don't have access to. Yeah, meet the people where they're at.
Absolutely.
Like, what do you think needs to happen in order for it to change and to adapt?
Wine is just not competing against wine. It's competing against everything, right?
RTDs, yeah, beer,
cannabis, you know, staying at home, ordering in food, you know. So I believe that the American consumer will have a huge shift to in-person events. As that starts to come back, you'll start to see, you know, wine showing up in those places that they hadn't really shown up in. And we just continue to build.
This grinding, this sort of friction that we're seeing right now is just growing pains.
If you look at COVID and those years, you know, America's just hung over. The world is hung over.
Yeah, that was unprecedented.
Yeah, we've never drank like that. And, you know, and maybe there needed to be a correction in the wine business.
This is kind of a cheesy question, but to wrap up, I guess this is kind of the best way to do it. So you've got your Bon Appetit success. You've got Maison Noir Wines. You're a father and a husband too. After all this success, what do you want the legacy of André Hueston Mack to be when it's all said and done?
That I left the world in a better place than which I found it.
Pretty simple, man. I can get with that.
That's it, brother. That's it, brother.
Thank you so much, my friend.
You're quite welcome.
Awesome.